sky-high rents, unaffordable homes, and neighborhoods losing their charm across Canada, some of the most well-known cities are becoming too expensive to live in. Families are packing up, streets are emptying, and residents are wondering, how did it get this bad? Have you noticed changes in your own city? Are homes sitting empty or rents skyrocketing in your neighborhood? In this video, we're uncovering why living in Canada is becoming impossible for many, digging into the skyrocketing housing costs, dwindling job opportunities, and what it all means for the future of urban living. Could your city be next? Before we dive in, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Your support lets us bring more travel insights your way. Canada's housing market, what was once a stepping stone to security and prosperity, has become a massive barrier for millions. Home prices have surged to unimaginable levels, leaving even middle-class Canadians wondering if they'll ever own a home. Take this. The average price of a home in Canada is now over $700,000. To put that in perspective, that's more than double what it was just a decade ago. In cities like Toronto and Vancouver, the numbers are even more staggering, with homes regularly surpassing the $1 million mark. Imagine saving for years, only to find out that even a modest house is out of reach. And it's not just home ownership that's a problem. Renters are struggling too. The rental market is on fire, with average rents in major cities soaring to record highs. In places like Toronto, monthly rent for a one-bedroom apartment can easily hit $2,400 or more. For many, this means half or even more of their income is gone before they've paid for food, utilities, or transportation. So, what's driving this crisis? A perfect storm of factors. A lack of affordable housing, growing demand fueled by record immigration, and skyrocketing construction costs. Add to that slow approval processes for new developments, and you've got a market where supply simply can't keep up with demand. But it's more than just numbers. It's about the ripple effects on real lives. Families squeezed into smaller spaces, young Canadians giving up on the dream of owning a home, and retirees delaying downsizing because they can't find affordable options. This housing crisis isn't just an economic issue, it's reshaping the very fabric of life in Canada. Have you or someone you know felt the effects of this housing crisis? What's the situation like in your community? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. Now, let's move on to the next piece of the puzzle. The cost of living and how it's adding even more pressure to Canadians across the board. So, let's talk about the cost of living. If you're living in Canada right now, you've probably noticed that everything feels, well, a little out of reach. Groceries? Up. Gas prices? Skyrocketing. And don't even get us started on utility bills. It's like every time you turn around, there's another expense creeping higher, making it harder to keep up. Here's the kicker. Wages just aren't keeping up with inflation. While the cost of basics like food and fuel has climbed dramatically, income growth has barely moved. For many Canadians, it feels like they're running a marathon just to stay in the same place. And let's be real. How many times can you cut back on your morning coffee before it starts to feel like you're cutting back on life itself? Take groceries, for example. The price of fresh produce and staples like bread and eggs has jumped by double digits in some areas. Families are having to make tough choices at the checkout line, often sacrificing healthier options because they're simply too expensive. And it doesn't stop there. Utilities like electricity and heating have seen major price hikes, especially in provinces like Ontario. And then there's gas. Prices at the pump have hit record highs, making commutes and daily errands a real pain for those who drive. Public transportation is supposed to be the cheaper alternative, right? But in many cities, transit fares are climbing too, adding yet another burden for commuters. The big question is, where does this leave the average Canadian? For many, it's a constant cycle of stress, trying to figure out how to stretch their paycheck to cover it all. Some are dipping into savings, while others are racking up credit card debt just to make ends meet. And honestly, how long can that last before it all comes crashing down? Let's not forget the emotional toll this takes. It's not just about dollars and cents, it's about the anxiety of not knowing if you can keep up. For younger generations, it's about putting life milestones like buying a home or starting a family on hold. For retirees, it's about worrying if their fixed income will cover rising expenses. These aren't just statistics, they're people's lives. So, how are you feeling about the rising cost of living? Have you had to make sacrifices or rethink your spending? Share your experiences in the comments. It's a conversation we all need to have. Next, let's dive into how immigration is playing a role in Canada's housing and cost of living crisis. It's a topic that's sparking a lot of debate, so let's unpack it together. Canada is known worldwide for its welcoming policies, and let's be clear, Immigration is a huge part of what makes this country vibrant, diverse, and thriving. But lately, it's also become part of the conversation around the housing crisis and rising costs. So, what's really going on? Last year alone, Canada welcomed over 400,000 newcomers, one of the highest immigration levels in its history. That's incredible for economic growth, but here's the catch. All those people need places to live. Most immigrants settle in urban centers like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, cities that are already bursting at the seams when it comes to housing demand. With so many people competing for the same limited number of homes, it's no wonder prices keep climbing. But housing is just the tip of the iceberg. Immigration also increases the demand for services like healthcare, education, and public transportation. And while more people mean more economic activity, it also puts pressure on systems that are already stretched thin. For newcomers, this often translates to long wait times for essential services, expensive rental markets, and limited job opportunities. Hardly the warm welcome Canada is famous for. Let's not forget that many immigrants face wage disparities and underemployment when they arrive. Imagine coming to Canada with hopes of a better life, only to find yourself stuck in a job far below your skill level because your qualifications aren't recognized. It's a reality for many newcomers, and it adds to the frustration of trying to build a life in an already expensive environment. Of course, immigration isn't the problem. It's the lack of planning to support it. Canada needs immigrants to fuel its economy and offset its aging population. But without enough affordable housing, better infrastructure, and support systems in place, it's like inviting guests to a party when you've run out of chairs. Everyone's left scrambling and no one's having a good time. How do you feel about this balancing act? Should Canada focus on building more housing before increasing immigration targets? Or is the issue more about improving support systems? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. This is a conversation with no easy answers. Now that we've unpacked immigration, let's turn to another major factor shaping Canada's economy: the decline of resource-based industries. It's a big shift with ripple effects across the country. Let's dive in. For decades, Canada's economy was built on its natural resources: oil, gas, timber, and minerals. These industries didn't just drive economic growth. They defined entire regions, provided stable jobs, and gave the country a sense of identity. But now, things are changing, and not everyone is ready for what comes next. Let's start with oil and gas. Alberta, often called the heart of Canada's energy sector, has seen a steep decline in jobs over the past decade. Global shifts toward renewable energy, fluctuating oil prices, and increased automation have all taken a toll. It's great for the environment in the long run, but for the workers who've spent their lives in these industries, the transition has been anything but easy. Imagine working in a field that provided steady paychecks for decades, only to find yourself unemployed and unsure where to turn. Many of these jobs require highly specific skills, and transitioning to new industries isn't as simple as flipping a switch. Rural communities, in particular, have felt the brunt of this shift, with small towns struggling to attract new businesses or industries to replace the jobs that have been lost. Then there's the issue of automation. In mining, forestry, and other resource-based industries, technology is replacing manual labor at an unprecedented rate. While automation increases efficiency, it also leaves fewer opportunities for workers who relied on those jobs to support their families. The result? Communities built around these industries are facing population decline as residents leave in search of work elsewhere. But here's the flip side. Canada's natural resources are still a major asset. The country is rich in potential for renewable energy like hydro, wind, and solar power. If investments are made in retraining workers and developing these industries, Canada could lead the way in green energy innovation. The challenge is figuring out how to bridge the gap between the old economy and the new. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture: how geography plays a key role in Canada's housing and economic challenges. It's a tale of two Canadas, and the divide is only growing. Let's explore. Canada's geography is breathtaking, no doubt about it. From the towering Rockies to the bustling streets of Toronto, it's a country of incredible diversity. But when it comes to housing and economic opportunity, geography tells a much more complicated story: a tale of two Canadas. In the south, we have major urban centers like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. These cities are magnets for jobs, education, and culture, which means people flock there in droves. But all that demand has created a housing market that feels almost impossible to break into. The average home price in Toronto is now over $1.2 million, and Vancouver isn't far behind. Renters face bidding wars just to secure an apartment, and finding affordable housing feels more like winning the lottery than a realistic goal. Now, head north or into rural regions, and you'll find a completely different picture. Housing is far more affordable, but the trade-off is limited job opportunities and underfunded infrastructure. In many small towns, homes sit vacant because there simply aren't enough people or businesses to sustain the community. It's a frustrating paradox. Some places have too much demand, while others don't have enough. This divide isn't just about housing, it's about access to resources and opportunities. In urban centers, public transit, healthcare, and educational institutions are often within reach, though crowded and expensive. In rural areas, residents may have to drive hours to see a specialist or send their kids to a decent school. It's like living in two different worlds all within the same country. The question is, how do we bridge this gap? Could investments in rural infrastructure and incentives for businesses to move into smaller communities help distribute the population more evenly? Or do we need to rethink how we build and manage housing in cities to make urban living more affordable? Next, let's tackle one of the biggest contributors to this whole mess: the housing supply crisis. What's holding back new construction, and how do we fix it? Let's dive in. If you're wondering why housing costs in Canada keep climbing, a big part of the answer is simple. There just aren't enough homes. The housing supply crisis has been brewing for years, and it's one of the main reasons why so many Canadians are struggling to find an affordable place to live. So, what's holding back new construction? For starters, there's the bureaucratic red tape. Building new homes in Canada often means navigating a maze of zoning laws, permits, and local government regulations. Projects can take years just to get approved, and in that time, demand only continues to grow. Then there's the issue of rising construction costs. The cost of materials like lumber, steel, and concrete has skyrocketed in recent years, driven in part by supply chain disruptions. Add to that labor shortages in the construction industry, and you've got a situation where building new homes is slower and more expensive than ever. And let's not forget NIMBYism, the not-in-my-backyard mentality. In many neighborhoods, residents oppose new developments, particularly higher-density housing like condos or apartment buildings. While understandable in some cases, this resistance only makes it harder to create affordable housing options in areas where they're needed most. The numbers are staggering. According to recent studies, Canada needs to build over 3.5 million homes by 2030 to meet demand and restore affordability. But at the current rate of construction, we're nowhere close to hitting that target. So, where does that leave first-time buyers? For many, the dream of homeownership is slipping further and further away. Saving for a down payment feels impossible when prices keep climbing, and strict mortgage rules make it even harder to qualify for loans. Even renters are feeling the squeeze, as limited housing supply drives up demand, and with it, rent prices. The solution: experts point to reforms like streamlining building approvals, offering incentives to developers for affordable housing projects, and revisiting zoning laws to allow for more density in urban areas. But these changes take time, and the question is whether they'll come soon enough to make a difference for Canadians struggling right now. How do you feel about this? Should Canada focus on cutting red tape to speed up construction, or is there another way to tackle the supply crisis? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your ideas. Now, let's look at how all these challenges, from housing shortages to high costs, are impacting Canadians' overall quality of life. What does the future hold if things don't change? Let's find out. Let's get real for a moment. All these issues, the housing crisis, rising costs, and economic pressures, they're not just numbers on a page. They're real problems impacting real people. And for many Canadians, the stress is starting to feel overwhelming. Think about it. Families crammed into smaller apartments because they can't afford bigger spaces. Young adults staying with their parents well into their 30s because homeownership feels like a pipe dream. And retirees delaying downsizing because even selling their home won't cover the cost of a move. These aren't just isolated stories, they're becoming the norm. For younger Canadians, it's especially tough. Millennials and Gen Z are facing a reality where homeownership is a far-off goal, if it's even achievable at all. Many are stuck in a cycle of renting, with rents eating up so much of their income that saving for a down payment feels impossible. It's no wonder this generation is often referred to as Generation Rent. And let's not forget the emotional toll. The constant pressure to keep up with rising costs leaves many feeling like they're one bad month away from financial disaster. Stress, anxiety, and even depression are on the rise as Canadians grapple with the fear of falling behind. For retirees, the picture isn't much rosier. Those on fixed incomes are finding it harder to make their savings stretch, especially with essentials like groceries and utilities becoming more expensive. Dreams of a peaceful retirement are being replaced by concerns about how to afford basic living expenses. But it's not just individuals who are feeling the strain, it's communities too. When people are forced to move away because they can't afford to stay, neighborhoods lose their character. Small businesses struggle without a steady customer base. Schools face declining enrollment, and the social fabric of communities begins to fray. How is this affecting your quality of life? Are you feeling the pinch of these challenges? Or have you found ways to adapt? Share your experiences in the comments. This is a conversation we all need to have. But now, let's shift gears and talk about solutions. What's being done to tackle these challenges? And is there hope for a better future? Let's dive in. So, here's the big question. What's the way forward? The challenges facing Canada may feel overwhelming, but they're not insurmountable. In fact, there are already efforts underway to address these issues. It's just a matter of making them work. When it comes to housing, government initiatives are key. Programs aimed at building affordable housing and offering incentives to developers to create more inclusive communities are a good start. But to really make a dent, we need bold changes. Think reforming zoning laws to allow for higher density housing, streamlining building approval processes, and increasing funding for public housing projects. On the economic front, there's also potential. Investing in green energy and tech industries could create new job opportunities for workers transitioning out of traditional resource sectors. Expanding retraining programs and education opportunities can help Canadians gain the skills they need to thrive in a changing economy. And then there's the role of communities. Grassroots efforts to support one another, whether it's advocating for local housing initiatives, creating co-op housing models, or supporting small businesses, can make a huge difference. When people come together to push for change, they create momentum that even the biggest challenges can't resist. But here's the thing, no single solution will fix everything. It's going to take a mix of strong government policies, private sector innovation, and community action to turn things around. And most importantly, it's going to take all of us, raising our voices, sharing our ideas, and working together. What do you think? Are there solutions you believe could help? Or maybe examples from your own community that are already making a difference? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear them. Canada is at a crossroads. From skyrocketing housing prices to rising costs of living, these challenges are reshaping the way we live, work, and dream. But as we've explored today, these issues aren't just problems, they're opportunities for change. With bold action, creative solutions, and a commitment to fairness, Canada can turn things around and remain a place of opportunity for everyone. What about you? Have you noticed these changes in your own life or community? Are you hopeful for Canada's future, or do you think the road ahead will be tough? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters, and your story can inspire others. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more deep dives into important topics like this one. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep exploring and keep dreaming.